We're going to dive into all about steam generation methods, where it comes from, how it's generated, and what you need to consider when designing systems around different sources. David, I'm really excited to have you here. I know you've spent your career figuring out how to navigate the complexities of humidification, and I know that steam generation is one of the foundational aspects. So let's dive in. Today, my first question for you are, what are the most common ways we can generate steam for humidification?
Well, so let's go back to isothermal dispersion, and this is where we want steam.
Right.
And as we talked about early on, if you've got a boiler available, tap into it. Now, you have to consider potentially what is in the boiler. Are there corrosion inhibitors and stuff like that maybe I don't want to put that into what's making it the airstream that I'm breathing?
Sure.
So that's a consideration that, hey, I may have the boiler available, but I have to understand what's in it. And so if that's not a concern, or it's all good, it's just plain water, hey, disperse that directly. If you don't, now we're getting into generation where we have to make the steam because we don't have it available. Now, if you've got that boiler already available, maybe we can do that indirectly. We can still use it as an energy source. You've got all that energy, the steam already, and send it through a heat exchanger as an example. But then you have a separate source of water that's being used for humidification. So no more concerns potential with what's being used for adding it to the airstream, because now you've isolated what's in the boiler stays in the boiler, what's going into the airstream is a separate source. Otherwise, you're thinking through, okay, what other utilities do I have available?
Sure.
Do I have electricity? If so, hey, what is the voltage? What is the phase? I have to kind of understand that. Do I have enough? And where is that potentially located versus where I'd want to add the moisture? Or hey, maybe it makes sense to do it on a large capacity system using natural gas. It tends to be, for a larger capacity system, you can do more with it. There's a lot of electrical current required sometimes to make steam. Doing it a little bit more efficient with the burner. But you have to kind of understand what I've got available, how I'm going to mitigate that. There's additional considerations you have to understand.
I know when we think of dry steam, we love our steam, right? So what are some of the technologies available from dry steam to make steam when I don't have a boiler?
Probably the most common is to use electricity. And what the nice part about it is you can hook up, maybe it's a really small load, and okay, small, no, not much of an issue. There's not much utilities to come into play. If you're working with a larger capacity system, you can still do it. And you just have to have the electrical service to be able to do it. And you don't have all the complexity of getting natural gas to it or venting, as an example, with a gas humidifier. So placement is a lot more fluid with it. From a technology standpoint, just understanding, okay, how tight a control do you need? Because now we're not tying into the boiler. We need to regulate how much steam we're making.
Sure.
And there's different technologies to kind of consider. If you're looking for something with tight control, you need to be able to dial it in really easily. And I think of an SSR type control, like a dimmer, that allows you to dial exactly what you want very tightly. If you need a really wide range, turn the contactor on and off. We generally don't think of it as, hey, we're just going to turn it on or turn it off like we do in a residential application. We're typically a little bit more sophisticated when we're talking about commercial industrial humidification. So you want to dial it into what you need to exactly. And so you could do with electricity, maybe it's electric resistance heaters. The benefit of those is you can dial those in right where you need to. Well, otherwise, you can use an electrode type. And that goes back to our conversation on maintenance. Mm-hmm. Do you just take the tank and throw it away and put a new one in? Okay, that's, from a maintenance standpoint, makes sense. There's a trade-off you do, though. And when you do that type, okay, the controllability isn't as tight because you're passing current directly through the water. So it depends on how much water is in the tank and how much of the electrodes are covered. Mm-hmm. There's a trade-off. The maintenance is simpler, but now I don't get as tight of a control. Otherwise, okay, we talked about the steam to steam, so using the boiler steam indirectly. And that works just great. A larger capacity system, a gas humidifier may make the most sense. Being able to put that outdoors now, it's very simple. Throw an outdoor enclosure on it, it's rain and windshield and rated for the environment, even our cold Minnesota winters.
Sure.
It'd be just fine out on a roof. And I don't have all that complexity to deal with.
And that is a good segue into my next question, because I mean, where can steam generators be installed? I know you just mentioned outdoors within an outdoor enclosure, but where else can we install a steam generator in order to power our dispersion?
You can put a steam generator pretty much anywhere. What I would caution against is just make sure it's accessible.
Sure.
We talked about maintenance previously and knowing, okay, boiling water to make the steam. Okay, what's left behind is the mineral deposits. And so you want to make sure it's accessible. And so putting it in a ceiling space or tucked in a closet nobody ever looks, it's not likely to be maintained. And if it's a critical application, you want to make sure that the humidification system works. Instead of knowing, hey, we don't meet set points, you'd rather get a little bit proactive versus reactive of, hey, we got a problem here. And so having it accessible is kind of a key piece. And putting out a roof, if you don't have room within a space, mechanical room's already full of other equipment. Sure. Putting out a roof can be a great way to be able to do that. But you have to consider, where are we going to add, you're going to make the steam, but you have to disperse it. If the air handler is somewhere further away, well, you have to get from point A to point B. So putting the generator near where the dispersion is probably one of the other things to kind of keep in mind. And sometimes you just don't have space for it. But putting it near each other, we talked about inefficiencies early on. And the longer you have to go from the generation to the dispersion, there's more inefficiencies, more losses. You can mitigate those with insulating it, but you have to plan, where's the condensate going to get into pitching. It just makes it more complicated. More
Sure.
can go wrong. So trying to keep that nearby is ideal. And where you've got space and where people are going to pay attention to it are some of those key things.
Sure. Are there any other provisions that I need to consider when I'm looking at getting my steam produced from the generator to that steam dispersion method?
I think, like we talked about, understanding where it's placed, what the maintenance piece is. We
Yep.
touched on that briefly, just understanding that portion and how the piping gets from point A to point B. I think those are some of the key things to understand. There's a technology piece that you always have to kind of balance of, hey, do you throw the latest bells and whistles into it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you get into something that you kind of set it and forget it? And sometimes humidifiers can do that, but generally, they need a little bit of maintenance, a little TLC to kind of check on them periodically. Make sure it's running. Otherwise, the only way it's not working is it's dry in here.
Right.
And you notice the after effect versus being proactive with it. And being able to monitor it is another key thing that can help on that standpoint.
Sure. And I'm really glad that you touched on piping there, because I am curious, what are the sort of materials that I should be using the most when I'm thinking of the piping from my generator to my dispersion panel?
Partially depends on capacity. If
Sure.
you're working with a small capacity type system and it's nearby, a steam hose is great. It works perfectly. The problem was, if you get further away, how do you support it to make sure it doesn't sag?
Sure.
And so you get further away, then you're looking at hard pipe or tubing as an example, typically stainless or copper, very common types of materials. And when you get into higher capacity systems, your pipe just gets bigger and bigger. And whether that's a threaded type connection or you end up getting into flanges in order to be able to bolt different sections together as an example. So the application will kind of determine what it is. And going back to the efficiencies, you want to keep steam as possible. So
Sure.
Oversizing the piping just creates more opportunity for losses. And so insulating it is an important piece, and thinking through, how am I going to pitch this? How's the condensate going to get out of the system? Are some of those other things to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking of piping, besides the materials?
Sure. Awesome. Well, David, I really appreciate that overview. Understanding the differences in the steam sources and the distribution methods is key to getting the whole system right. So I really appreciate you being here again. And audience, I appreciate you being here as well. Really thank you for your time. We have one more session left next time where we'll be looking at DriSteam's dry calc software, which ties all the pieces that we've talked about in the last 4 sessions together in order for you to properly size and spec a humidification system for whatever your application is. So thanks again. And if you need any additional resources or you want any other information about any of our humidification products or resources, visit us at DriSteem.com, where you can download all sorts of white papers, look at product information, and even access our learning management system, where you can take other courses about DriSteam solutions. So thank you again, and we'll catch you next time.